Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be talking about all the offensive linemen in this draft class. So it's going to be a little bit of a longer video, and in turn, I can't go super duper in detail about each player, but certain players you'll see that I really love coming out of this class. There's going to be 7 offensive tackles that I'll go over first, and then there's going to be about 10 interior offensive linemen that I'll also go over. So just kind of give you an idea of like all the offensive linemen that I think could go within the top 100. So start off with number 7, offensive tackle is going to be Charles Grant out of William & Mary. Now, Charles Grant had a fantastic year. Obviously, William & Mary, a little bit lower competition, but you still see a lot of the good traits from him, good size, good footwork. He just needs to work on his anchor, which I think, potentially if he's able to sit behind for a year, which is the reason why I have him so low, I think he can potentially develop into a good offensive lineman. Now, that being said, if you're going to take somebody in the late second, third round, because I can see him potentially, depending on how quickly these tackles go off the board, I can see him go a lot higher than I think he probably should go. Let's say he goes in the third. Some potential fits that I can see him going in is going to the Eagles. Obviously, Lane Johnson is by far the best tackle that I've seen. Best right tackle that I've seen in my lifetime. So he's getting up there in age. He's 30, I don't want to age him, but probably 35, 36. So if that's the case, if he's actually no, he's probably closer to 33. Sorry. But he's getting up there in age. More than likely going to retire within the next 1 or 2 more years. So you get a potential replacement for him to develop behind him for at least a year or 2, and then take over by year 3, and then hopefully he's able to flourish and to be the next bookend tackle for years and years and years to come. So I think that'd be a great fit for him because he's not forced to start because you have 2 bookend tackles. Another one that I'm kind of looking at is potentially the Colts. I think that, yes, you've got Bernard Ryman, who's filled in quite nicely at left tackle. Let's see if he can continue to develop. And then also you have Braden Smith, Auburn. I love Braden Smith. But he's also coming off of kind of a weird year. He's going to his last year of his contract. I know that technically they might have drafted Matt Gonclaves, I think is his name, to be the replacement. But if they want to move him inside to fit where Will Fry's left, then you can take Charles Grant to be the eventual replacement for Braden Smith if you want to move on and just make sure your offensive line is cheaper and also younger. So that's another potential fit I can see for Charles Grant. And the last one is the Raiders. I don't know what they're going to do with DJ Glaze. I think that they feel okay with him, but because he had a pretty okay season, like I said, I think I can't remember if last year was rookie or his second year, but he's still relatively young offensive tackle. You got Colt Miller, who's going into, I think he's either 29 to 30. Like I said, he's going to get re-signed. I feel pretty confident about that. But if you're not super duper confident with DJ Glaze, and you're kind of seeing okay, I can have a position battle, and then whoever doesn't win it could potentially go to over to right guard. Like I said, I feel pretty confident they're going to have Powers Johnson be pretty good, Colt Miller be pretty good, but they still need to fill out the offensive line. And if you're looking in the 3rd round, I think that's a perfectly fine place to try to take Charles Grant to potentially, okay, let's just throw some bodies at this offensive line to make sure we can try to fix it to where we can have a strong run game if they want to take one in the 1st round, if they want to take one in the 2nd round. It's really up to the Raiders. I don't know where they're going quite yet. Obviously, a lot of people said they go on Raiders. The Raiders are going running back early on. If that's the case, you still need to fix the offensive line. You definitely need to fix that cornerback room. So I would think that they might go offensive line in the 3rd round to fix in the first 2 rounds, whether it be running back or cornerback. Moving on to number 6, and this is a tackle that I really love, and that's Aireontae Ersery from Minnesota. Like I said, huge offensive tackle that has really good feet. Now, some of the kind of things that I kind of want to talk about is not only is he big, not only does he have great feet, but there are some negatives as far as you're able to kind of see it, especially when he went against Abdul Carter, Penn State, obviously, top 3 pick. That's going to happen. but you saw him against speed. Now, against bigger guys, against people who aren't as athletic as Abdul Carter, he moved really, really well. And even against Abdul Carter, you could see sometimes he moved really, really well. However, because he is so big, a lot of times he sometimes got overextended to where Abdul Carter got a couple of times where he set him up nicely on the outside, and because Abdul Carter is really, really twitchy, really, really fast, cut inside, and it was really hard for Ersery to be able to adjust to that. Now, like I said, I think obviously going into the NFL, you're going to get more coaching. You're going to be able to hopefully be able to fix some of those problems. But as far as athletically wise, I think that he has potential to be able to be a really good tackle in the league because of the fact that it's very hard to see someone to move that well for as big as he is. So I think some of that's just going to be more of just eyes and just his mind, just knowing how to handle counters. And like I said, some of his hand placement is not necessarily, upper tier of some of the other tackles I'll be talking about. So like I said, I think really solid, and I think has potential to get even better. But some of the fits that I want to talk about for Ersery is the Jets. I think Ersery is probably going to go in the second round. Obviously, a lot of people, and myself included, think there's a potential particular person that's going to go to the Jets at number 7. But if they pass up on him, go with somebody else, then I could see there be a potential for the Jets to be like, okay, we still want to get our bookend tackles. Let's get this guy who is going to move well, who in this kind of style offense that we might be running with Justin Fields, it's going to be helpful if you have a very, very powerful tackle who moves well. So I think this would be a good fit for them. Obviously, I think they're just going to go in a different direction. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But if they decide to go with a weapon in the first round, I could obviously see that Ersery could go to the Jets. Next one I want to talk about is my Panthers. So I fully do think that we're going to go with a tackle in the second round, mainly because we didn't re-sign Taylor Moton, even though I really, really love him. And we're also not committing totally to Ikem Ekwonu for the future, even though we technically have until I think May 2nd is when we have to, the deadline for the 5th-year option. The way that it's making me feel like we're probably going to take somebody to replace Taylor Moton. So on the right side, having Ersery be there for a year to learn under Taylor Moton to eventually, I know it sucks to eventually take your job, but I would rather prefer to have Taylor Moton. But if I can replace him with Ersery, then I feel pretty good about it, because not only do I feel like he's a really, really talented offensive lineman, but with that extra year coaching, with our amazing offensive line coach, I would love that for him. I love that for him to be able to develop, and as far as helping us as far as cap space, because he's going to be significantly cheaper than having to pay Taylor Moton, who's going to get big bucks, whether it be in this offseason or would it be somebody else or somewhere else. And then also the Vikings. Obviously, comes from Minnesota. I know he's been meeting up with the Vikings. This would be in case, obviously you have Darisaw, who's coming back from injury, Brian O'Neill, who had a okay season, but this could potentially be where some of these tackles, and I've already moved some of them into the interior offensive line class, some of these tackles are going to move inside, and I think that's still a good move for them. If Minnesota feels that way, and they put him at guard, especially put him at left guard beside Darisaw, that would be crazy. Because like I said, he has great feet for as big as he is. As big as he is, he could be a guard. I think he can still work out at left tackle because of his feet. But I think his potential through the roof is if he's able to kind of close things off to be able to mirror inside, where he doesn't have to focus on oh crap, this guy's gonna reach me, overset he sometimes does, and then that counter inside was really kind of screwed with him in the past. I think that would really help him if he moves over into guard, but I feel pretty confident that he can work out in the NFL as a tackle. But if that's what Minnesota sees him as, I think that would be perfect for him going to the second round, and really establishing that offensive line to where okay, Minnesota, you made a lot of moves in the free agency, you made a lot of moves in the draft last year. Now you don't have as many draft picks, but let's see what you can potentially do in this upcoming draft to try to make sure you can kind of get over that hump and finally, make a deep playoff run. So those are the tier 3 tackles. Now going to tier 2, and I have 2 of them. One of them is going to be Ozzy Trapilo from Boston College. Now, Ozzy is a person that I'd not really like had my eyes on until this year, and it was mainly because of Donovan Jackson. I'll talk about him when I talk about about the edge rankings. But I watched a lot of Boston College games because I started to fall in love with Donovan Jackson, and because I was doing so, I also started to watch Ozzy. So because I started watching like Boston College games, started watching their offense, I started to notice this guy who was doing a really good job, and that is Ozzy Trapilo. And honestly, I haven't seen a lot of people talking about him as much, which I'm kind of surprised about. Like, Ersery gets talked about a good bit, which obviously he should. But I don't see as many people talking about Ozzy, and I'm kind of surprised. Like I said, really solid player. I think he's like 6'8", I believe. Like good size, great feet. Can he work on his anchor? Absolutely. But I think, like, as far as like what he is right now, I think he's a really solid option that can transfer into the NFL pretty well. And in my opinion, I kind of feel like he's like almost like I want to say like a Luke Gadecki in a way. I think Trapilo will be drafted in the second round. I think he's going to be solid. Now, obviously, if he gets to Luke Gadecki's range, like as far as like being like a top 8 tackle in the league right now, which is still crazy. The Bucs have 2 top tackles in the league. I just still hate that as a Panthers fan. But I think Trapilo has potential to be really, really good, and he's being slept on a lot. So, Ozzy Trapilo, as far as some of the fits for him, I know that the Patriots are like really, really in love with this guy. Obviously, Boston College. Obviously, like there's other connections for him as well. If the Patriots are somehow able to either trade out of number 4 or somehow Abdul Carter doesn't go top 3 and he does fall into the 4, I can guarantee you that the Patriots are going to try to take Ozzy Trapilo in the second round or trade it back up in the first round to get him. Like I said, I feel they desperately need to fix that left tackle spot. They want to keep Ozzy Trapilo there and be able to just kind of fill out the rest of their roster and just kind of focus on, okay, we got our guy, we got our 2 bookends on the side on each line of the field. So you got Abdul Carter, you got Ozzy Trapilo. I think that'd be great for the Patriots if they're able to pull that off. If that is the case, that Abdul Carter somehow falls to them at 4. The other one is the Panthers. Kind of same as with Ersery. I kind of feel like the same way where I feel like we're going to take a tackle in the second round. And if we do, I'll be perfectly fine with either one of them because I feel like they can fill in that role as far as like learning a year, developing, especially like I said with Trapilo, getting a little bit better as far as like his anchor, because we have a really good offensive line coach. So would love for him to be able to be on the Panthers. But if not, there's one more team that could potentially see the Ozzy Trapilo working for, and that is unfortunately going to be for the Cardinals. So the Cardinals are in kind of a weird spot. I think obviously they have more needs. They have much more need at corner. Also, like I like the fact they got Josh Sweat. They still need some more interior help, especially because like they got Snacks for Thomason, and they also got Calais Campbell. I don't like what they have behind them, and also both of them are getting older. I mean, Calais Campbell was like, 30? Goodness gracious. I like Calais Campbell, he's still producing at a high level, even as old as he is, but he's like 35, 36. Like, I'm probably going to lower than what he actually is. But I think they'll probably try to address them. I would think they'll try to address them early on in the draft, but if they they want to get 2 bookend tackles where they already got Paris Johnson Jr. Obviously Jonah Williams, he's had a lot of his injury concerns. They also have I think they still have Kelvin Beachum, who's like 33, but he's like more of like a swing tackle as it is. But if they want to try to find a bookend tackles, that would be my potential of where I could be like, okay, I can understand that taking him in a second and just being like, okay, what you're going to give this offensive line its best shot at potentially being a force in the NFC West, because at the end of the day, especially going against the Rams, you have to have a good offensive line. If you have to compete with the Rams, you got to have a good offensive line, because right now they have one of the best young defensive lines that we have seen in the NFL. So I can kind of see the Cardinals potentially taking Ozzy. Now for number 4, and that's going to be where I could potentially see him maybe making in the first round. Like I said, it really depends on how these tackles end up going in the draft. But that's going to be Josh Conerly Jr. from Oregon. Like I said, he's still a little bit more raw to me, where I think that it'd be beneficial if he was able to sit. But I think that a lot of people are going to look at him and be like, no, we'll deal with some of the bumps and bruises in his first year, and we'll like to see like him to be able to develop kind of like the same exact way that Ikem Ekwonu, like he had his lumps in his rookie year, had a good unfortunately had a bad second year with everything that happened, but then came into his third year and had a really good year. So I think Josh Conerly has a really good mean streak. I think he has a really good movement. Still need to work on a little bit of his hand placement, obviously, and I think that sometimes he gets himself in bad situations because he starts to lunge a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of things to like about him. I like his size. He's like, I think 6'4", 315 is like I said, pretty good size. And he has decent arms. He's not like, who I'll eventually talk about, Will Campbell, which I think gets overblown a little bit. But as far as being a draft prospect, an offensive tackle prospect, I think there's going to be a lot of teams that look at him and be like, you know what? We'll take a shot at him in the first round, or we'll get him in the second round. So just kind of talk about where I think some of his fits could possibly be. Number one, I think the Texans have looked at him because the Texans are in a weird spot where obviously their offensive line is a huge concern right now. And with where they're at, they're 25, there's potential for a lot of people to either trade up ahead of them or of people who are going to take tackles early, and there's going to be a small pool for them to potentially take. So if they like Josh Conerly as being a tackle, or if they want to move Josh Conerly inside for year one, whatnot, the Texans need help in the offensive line regardless. So I think in this case, they would kind of see him as being more of a versatile piece and just, okay, wherever we need you on the offensive line, we'll get you in the building. We'll try to improve some of the stuff that we start to see on tape, and just kind of hope for the best. Like really and truly, I think that the Texans are going to take a for sure interior offensive lineman in the first round, but you take the best talent that you possibly can. And the other one I could possibly see at the, like I said, at the end of the first round are going to be two NFC East teams. That's the Commanders, and that's also the Eagles. So the Eagles, same as I think I had talked about before with Charles Grant, but in this case is a first-round pick to make sure you get the fifth-year option. Like I said, Lane Johnson's getting a little bit older, and you kind of want to make sure that you're able to have his replacement the same as I think you did with Jason Kelce. You drafted him a year early. I think it was a year early, or was it 2 years early? I can't remember when Cam Jurgens was drafted. But you basically already had his replacement learning under him for about a year or two, and then he takes over. So I can honestly see that happening for Josh Conerly. And also the Commanders. The Commanders are really liking him as well that I've seen. Obviously, they traded for Laremy Tunsil. However, the rest of the offensive line, I'm a little bit concerned about. Obviously, Sam Cosmi, he got hurt really, really late in the season. I don't know exactly his timeline for coming back right now. I think that he might just be out for the rest of the year. I don't know. Like I said, still like depending on how his recovery is. I'm not a big fan of Andrew Wiley either. A little bit older older player who has just been, like not the best. They let go of Cornelius Lucas, especially because they got Laremy Tunsil. But if you get Laremy Tunsil, you have Josh Conerly Jr. as a young rookie who's able to learn from Laremy Tunsil and be bookend tackles for the next however many years Laremy Tunsil continues to play. Like I said, for I would say probably 3 years, at least 3 years before whatever might be up happening. Those 3 years are going to be crucial for Jaden Daniels, who's going to be in his rookie contract. So I think that'll be beneficial for the Commanders to be able to try to take Josh Conerly Jr., put him at right tackle, have him and Laremy Tunsil. So, gone through Tier 2, gone through Tier 3, now I'm at Tier 1, and honestly, I love this tackle class. I've heard some people say this is a kind of a weak one. I don't understand why why people believe that. These top 3 tackles, I feel pretty confident in, even though there are some things that I'm like, you know what, might be injuries, might be some of their weird technique-wise or like how they look. But honestly, I feel pretty confident they're going to be able to work on the NFL. First off, and honestly, if it wasn't for injury, he'd probably be like 1A, 1B for me. That's going to be Josh Simmons. However, he's going to be number 3. It's because of the fact of his injury, and it's like a very significant one. Like, I've heard some people like, oh, what's the ACL? And I'm pretty sure it was something with actually his knee, like not just like, oh, it's just ACL, it'll heal on its own, da da da. These are still big things, especially for offensive linemen who are over 300 pounds, who are relying on their knees to be able to hold up. Like, I think because ACL has been able to be okay, well, everyone has kind of like gotten past it. It's not that as big of an injury as it used to be. It's still a huge injury, especially for someone who, like I said, is over 300 pounds. However, before then, his technique was great, his size is great, and his, like, as far as like his visuals, like understanding like, okay, placing his hands. Like I said, he would have been probably my number one tackle. So I think that there's some people who are going to get a steal out of him because of the fact he's going to fall because of his injury. So if that's the case, who could potentially take him in the first round? I list the 49ers, knowing good and well the 49ers are not going to take offensive lineman in the first round. I would have loved them to, and honestly, this would be the best spot for him, is because he can sit for sure for a year, or you can play him depending on what you want to do with the 49ers. But he gets to learn by Trent Williams. When I talked about before with Lane Johnson, Trent Williams is the best left tackle that I've seen in my lifetime. I'm still young, so it still helps. But still, like, legitimately, the 49ers need help on the offensive line, because once Trent Williams went down, it was not good. Dominic Puny was a good pick in the second round, so I could see the 49ers taking a tackle in the second round. But you need help on the offensive line. Trent Williams is not getting any younger, and you've kind of been placing people just like, it might be work. It's not really like, there's no difference maker. And you were like, okay, you know what? This is great. This is going to be able to carry our franchise for years and years to come. Jalen Moore went to the Chiefs, so you don't really have your backup plan anymore, because he played pretty decently when Trent Williams went down. But like, you need help, and I can see potentially taking a tackle in the offensive line in the first round, but you haven't shown it yet. So I'm just assuming, okay, they'll just wait the second round, get somebody, because, like I said, they need to address this. They need to address this in the draft. You have way too many picks to not try to take somebody in the first 100. So, 49ers, potential. That's on the higher end. Because of injury, he's going to fall down. And like I just said with Ozzy Trapilo being a tackle for the Cardinals, I could see Josh Simmons potentially, if he's there at 16, and obviously he's the one who transferred. If I remember correctly, he transferred in after Paris Johnson left, took over the left tackle role. But initially, he was right tackle where he was previously. I'm trying to remember where he was previously, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But if you're having both of them as your bookend tackles, I would have no worries whatsoever about your offensive line, because I feel like, okay, you got your two tackles. I think you can possibly fill in, especially in the guard, especially this offensive line class. If you take one later on, I would feel pretty confident about this Cardinals offensive line. Cardinals in general, I think they're on the precipice of potentially being able to compete. It's really going to depend on how they do in this draft. That I'm going to be like, okay, you know what? I think they could potentially win 9 games, potentially win 10 games, and try to make the playoffs. The Cardinals are a very, very fascinating team in this draft. And then the final one that I could see the Josh Simmons hitting, and it would anger every single person in the NFL, and that's the Chiefs. Because I know that a lot of Texans fans want Josh Simmons. And honestly, I wanted to put him as a draft fit. But I know that the Vikings have barely any picks in this draft. The Chiefs have a good little bit. They have an extra third as well, because of the fact that they traded because of the DeAndre Hopkins thing. Oh, no, sorry, no, for L'Jarius Sneed. So they are going to be able to move up in the draft. And for some reason, I just have this inkling that if Josh Simmons starts to fall, and there's somehow, some way that he finds himself all the way at pick 24, I feel like the Chiefs are going to trade up and try to get him. And it's going to tick Texans fans off. And I know I'm going on a little bit of ramble, but I, for some odd reason, just feel like, okay, if we're the Chiefs, we need to find a tackle for our future. Obviously, Jawan Taylor at the right side is not doing the best. Obviously, we can't find the left tackle. We just let go of Joe Tooney, who tried his best at left tackle. It hasn't really worked out for us. We tried it with Wayne Morris. We tried with Savaiinaea, who basically moved into at left guard. Right, I'm pretty sure at this point. Jalen Moore you signed, but who knows? But for some reason, I just feel like one of the best tackle prospects who just got injured is going to somehow find his way to the Chiefs. And if that happens, like, I'm good on the Chiefs, I guess. They trade up once again and get another star player. But that's what I think about Josh Simmons. Like I said, I think Josh Simmons is a really good prospect. He's going to fall in the draft because of injury, and it really depends on where he ends up going. But I feel pretty confident he's going to work in the league. And then the next two tackles, I feel pretty confident they're going to go high in the draft. I think sky's the limit as far as like their star power. But I'm going to put at number 2 Armand Membou from Missouri. Armand Membou, he's more of a right tackle, so obviously I'm putting him a little down than Will Campbell. But I feel like, you know, I think he's 6'4", like 320 something pounds. Like I said, really good movement. Obviously, people look at the 40 time. I mean, I'm not going to look at the 40 times and be like, oh, that shows he has really good movement. But super duper athletic is what I want to point out with there. Super duper athletic player who I think that if he goes to the right situation where they're going to keep him at right tackle, I feel pretty confident that he can be able to work on the NFL. I know there's some people who are like trying to move people like just randomly. I try not to, because especially like you're getting so used to working on the left, you try to move on the right, it's totally different as far as like the way you move, as far as like, you know, what some of your keys are on. So I'd much rather kind of keep people on the same side that they've been at for a very, very long time. But Armand Membou, sky's the limit on potential, but right now I think he's a really, really solid tackle that can get even better by, say, like a year 3 scenario. So what about the fits? Obviously, he's been connected to the Jets a lot at pick 7, and I would love that for him to have. You got Fashanu last year, who I liked, and if you get Armand Membou, you have your bookend tackles for the foreseeable future, and you don't have to worry about that for your offensive line, who's starting to kind of improve, and hopefully, like some of those draft picks that you also have, continue to develop. I think that would be the best thing you could possibly do for Justin Fields. However, there's potential they take a playmaker in the first round, and that's the reason why I said like there are some tackle prospects they could potentially take in the second round, like an Ersery. But Armand Membou for the Jets would be amazing for them. Another one I could potentially see is also the Patriots. Like I said, in this scenario, this would be more of like moving someone over to the left because they desperately need a left tackle. I know that they're like, you know, very athletic kind of player who could potentially work well in a scheme of like Josh McDaniels and what he's going to do for the Patriots. But I would rather him not go to the Patriots because I think that, like, you know, that move might mess him up. I would much rather keep him at right tackle. And that's the reason why I have for the last one is going to be the Cowboys. If somehow, some way he starts falling down, Jerry Love is going to love this guy. Now, I do know that technically you got Terrence Steele for like the long haul. You signed him to like, I can't remember how long that contract was, but it's kind of ridiculous. But I feel confident enough that your left side is good. You got Tyler Guyton, you got Tyler Smith, and you got goodness gracious, Cooper Beebe at center, who can also move into guard. But your right side of your offensive line is pretty atrocious. You got Robert Jones from the Dolphins, who I don't feel confident in at all, and Terrence Steele has not lived up to that contract at all, even though you did pay him that money. I feel confident enough that the Cowboys are definitely going to try to go for the right guard position. So if they think that Membou does better at right guard, they can move him inside as well. I think it's a little bit too high to take him, an inexperienced guard, at that position. But who knows? Like I said, I think the Cowboys are one of the teams. There's a couple of teams in the NFL draft, just like a small tangent, that are like the inflection points of the draft, because I think that it could potentially just go chalk like the first little couple of picks, because it's like there's not much difference between after you get done with like the first couple of blue chip prospects. You got like you're not really like a lot of different like a high value kind of players. But I think the Cowboys are one of the teams that could potentially like just completely screw up the draft of like what we expect to happen. But Membou, I think, is a really great player. I'm coming on a little bit tangent on that one. I think Membou's a really great talent. I would love to keep him on the right side. And in that case, please, Jets, take him. And like I said, have your booking tackles at least for the next 10 years of both of them sign long-term contracts. And then number 1 is going to be Will Campbell. Now, I do know that a lot of people think that Will Campbell is a guard, and I could see that potentially happening. That's the reason why I have him as more of a versatile type of player, because I think that he has a lot of like great abilities as far as like his anchor is really good, his feet are really good, his technique is wonky, but it works. Like I said, his stance is like he's almost like he's standing up, which is like really, really weird for me to see. But if it works, it works. Like I'm not going to try to fix that part of his game. And what he does need to work on, he's having that worked on by Duke Merriweather, who has done a fantastic job at fixing a lot of these players' mistakes. A lot of these top offensive linemen go to him to try to like work on their game as well. Like I said, I feel pretty confident. Him working with Duke, him already being as good as he is, I don't think that his 34-inch arms are going to be the difference of him being a tackle or a guard. I like Rashawn Slater coming out of college, coming out from Northwestern. He also had short arms as well. But I feel pretty confident that, you know what, his technique is going to take him far. And guess what? It has. Peter Skoronski, I actually felt he should be a guard. And it has worked out well for the Titans for him taking out at a guard. In this scenario, I feel like Will Campbell can be a tackle, and he's shown it in the SEC. I feel pretty confident that he's going to work out a tackle. So let's talk about some of the actual fits for Will Campbell. The type of player that he is, being nominated for being number 7 for LSU is a super huge deal as far as being a leader in the locker room, as far as being a good player, being one of the best players on the team. I think that if he should be there at 4, the Patriots are going to take him. 1, because the left tackle they have on the roster, I can't remember his first name, but Lowe, I would not want to start him at all. So you have to fix your left tackle spot. The only chance I see the Patriots not taking him at 4 is if somehow, Abdul Carter's there at 4. If he's not, take Will Campbell. Establish yourself as a culture. Protect the blind side of your quarterback. See if Drake May can be the guy. And I think that's going to improve your offensive line significantly. So, Will Campbell, the Patriots, I think is a chalk pick. However, somehow he starts to fall. Here are some other people I can see potentially taking him. If you're the Raiders, you need to fix the offensive line. But obviously the bigger problem is going to be more so running back, or it's going to be a cornerback. However, if you feel confident enough that you want to move Will Campbell inside, having Colton Miller, Will Campbell, and then also a Jackson Powers-Johnson at center would be absolutely amazing for your offense, because there is no way I don't think that's gonna mess up. Colton Miller's a really good tackle. I think that obviously higher of heights, Will Campbell could be at a guard. But as a tackle, I feel he's going to be a star. He'll be a superstar at guard. But why would you chance that? That's more like projection. And then Jackson Powers-Johnson had a pretty good rookie year. Well, second half of his rookie season. So if that's the case and he falls out to the Raiders, I could see him being taken there. And then the last one, I really don't feel like they're going to take a offensive lineman this high. But in that same exact sense, I don't like moving players to different sides of the offensive line, because people are so used to working like on this side. Like if you're working your left, you're so used to this. If you're working your right, so used to this. In that case, I don't want to move him. But the Giants' offensive line is not good outside of Andrew Thomas, and then you have some players that are like, we still don't know yet. He's still kind of young, or it is downright horrendous, like what you have with Evan Neal. And I'm just concerned about the well-being for the Giants. If you're able to actually, if Andrew Thomas comes back healthy and he's as good as he is, that's definitely going to help your offensive line. but it was still atrocious last year, and you desperately need to address that. So that's the only thing I possibly see is like, okay, if that's the case, either Armand Membou at right tackle or you can move Will Campbell inside, that's fine. But the Giants desperately need to work on that offensive line. But with how the board falls, I don't see them skipping out on either Abdul Carter or possibly Travis Hunter. Now, talk about the tackles. Let's talk about the interior offensive line. Like I said, 10 of these, so some of these are going to be kind of rapid fire. Starting off with number 10 is Marcus Mbow from Purdue. Tackle convert, going to be more so of like interior offensive lineman, a little bit on the smaller side. So I think he's going to be better as far as like better suited for in the third round for a developmental role. But I would love to see him being in an offense that's going to make him move a lot, especially like something like the zone blocking, because I think he works out really well for that. He has really good footwork. It's just more about the fact of like, okay, well, you know, he just needs to actually learn the position inside, because some people are going to have a little bit tough transition from tackle to interior. There are going to be a lot of these players that are going to be like that in the interior offensive line draft class. But some of this fits, like I said, I could see him potentially going to like the Dolphins, who, you know, obviously need help in the interior offensive line. They need a sense of identity. I would think Mbow would be able to work out perfectly well for them, especially the way that they want to run their offense. Texans definitely, like I said, Texans definitely need help in the interior. And I'll be interested, like I said, I think he has a really good mentality, and you need to bring that back in Texans, because that was a lot of concerns for Texans fans. Just like, it just seemed they didn't have like the dogs there that like actually wanted to, you know, one, backup CJ Stroud, because you saw a lot of that with Larry Tunsil, and also like a lot of the fire of like, you know, we need to see you actually continue to play. A little bit small tangent, but that's some of the stuff that I've heard from some Texans fan. But Marcus Mbow, really great. I could think of the third round, more developmental piece that I could see work out. And that's the reason why I think like in the Panthers case, we have two centers that are on one-year contracts that I'm interested to see if we potentially take a center who can develop and just be their eventual replacement for both of them. So that's really why Marcus Mbow is being a fit. But I feel pretty confident with the nice selection if that's the case, we want to take a center like in the third round. I don't think we do, but in that case, you have Jake Majors from Texas. Jake Majors from Texas has played, I think, 3 or 4 straight years, for sure 3 straight years, played a lot of games, a lot of snaps under his belt, and it's been really, really solid. And he was the one who's in charge of doing a lot of like the mics and stuff like that, and calling out stuff for the offensive line. That wasn't something that Quinn Ewers was doing. That's one of the conversations they've been talking about with a lot of Texans fans, is that Jake Majors was a lot of the reason why they're able to have as good an offensive line that they did this year. Now, obviously, Kelvin Banks is good. Talk about him a little bit later. But Jake Majors, I don't understand why he's flowing so hard under the radar. I know this isn't a great center class. There's only one other true center that I'm talking about, but like, I'm still kind of confused why he's getting like pushed down so far. If I'm a team that might miss out on the first 2 centers, I would be okay with taking Jake Majors like probably in the 4th round. But like, what, you're reaching in the 3rd round for a center that probably is going to be working out? Why would I be upset with that? So, like I said, I already said a fit with the Panthers, because, you know, we desperately need to find someone for the future of the position. We don't have that technically yet. So I could potentially see him like being drafted and kind of like sitting for a year, kind of like working on some of his technique and then taking over. Also, Giants, like I said, Giants need to fix the offensive line in general. So if you want to focus more on like skill position, or like you said, like Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter in the third round pick, on the 3rd overall pick, then I could potentially say you fix your interior by taking Jake Majors. But the big one is the Cowboys, because you fix the problem that you have right now. I already talked about the left side. You got a good left side. You got Cooper Beebe, who I like coming out as a center, but he was a guard. If you can move him over to right guard and have Jake Majors later in the 3rd, then I feel pretty confident in that offensive line, because I'm like, okay, you fixed the hole you have. You have a huge Zach Martin hole at right guard. You try to replace it with Robert Jones, and let's see how that works out. But I don't feel pretty confident with it. So if the Cowboys can take a center and be able to move Cooper Beebe over, I think that'll be amazing for the Cowboys and be able to be like, okay, you know what? We've invested in the offensive line. Let's see if this works out. And if it does, you have a very young, good offensive line for the next at least 5 years, because you can potentially re-sign some of these players. And you basically did what you did all the way back in 2011 is where you kind of built your offensive line from there. You got Tyron Smith, you got Zach Martin, Travis Frederick, unfortunately, before he had to retire. Like I said, you actually invested in the offensive line, and it worked out really, really well for you. So that's just something that I could potentially see the Cowboys doing. Now moving on to number 8? Yeah, number 8, interior offensive lineman, and that is going to be Wyatt Milum from West Virginia. Now, I feel there's a chance he could still stick at tackle, and I think he has like I said, really good motor, really good technique. I am just kind of concerned about some of the size concerns, especially against power. I think it'd be beneficial if he's able to move inside and be in a scheme, kind of like what I talked about with Marcus Mbow, as far as being more of a zone blocking scheme, because he did really, really well at that at West Virginia. So in that case, honestly, the Dolphins need help in the offensive line, and he would be a perfect fit, in that second, third round kind of ordeal, as far as being just a guy you know what, move inside, take away Liam Eichenberg, put him at left guard. Hopefully, Patrick Paul, after a year of development, can take over Armstead, and be able to have a really good left side of your offensive line to be able to compete with this AFC East that I think is starting to grow. Obviously, we'll see what happens with the Jets, but you already have the Bills as good as it is, and the Patriots, who have heavily invested in their defensive line. You need to have a good offensive line, because otherwise you're going to be left in the dust. So if the Dolphins do not invest in their offensive line in this draft class, I'm going to be ticked off, one, because you didn't do it last year, outside of Patrick Paul. But I think there's a lot of good interior offensive linemen that you could take in the second and third round. You have a lot of different options that can be able to improve your ability, because you lost Robert Hunt, and it showed last year. So you desperately need to find an identity, and I think Wyatt Milum could be one of those guys. Another particular place you could work out for is the Commies. So the Commanders, I said Commies, that's what I wrote down, but kind of shortened it. But the Commanders, like I said, need help in the offensive line, mainly because, one, Samuel Cosby is hurt for most of the year. You kind of were working around subpar offensive line play that was doing a lot better because, one, Jane Daniels was able to run away from a lot of the pressure that was being put on him. And also, I think that a lot of people were kind of surprised with some of the stuff that Cliff Kingsbury was throwing out to him. So, if you want to improve the offensive line, Wyatt Milum in the, like I said, second or third round could work out for the Commanders. Now, the last fit I could potentially see is going to the Colts. Now, Colts are another team that are desperately going to need help, and especially in the interior. I've kind of mentioned a little bit of the offensive tackle, because there's still some kind of don't really know what's going to go on with Braden Smith. But because there's been some talks about potentially getting rid of him in next offseason. But you lost Will Fries. You lost Ryan Kelly. So you're losing a lot of your one starting experience in the interior. But you're going into a season where you desperately need to see if Anthony Richardson is going to be the guy. You cannot have that happen without a good offensive line. So I can honestly see the Colts looking in the second round, because they're probably going to go in different directions in the first round, but going in the second round to make sure they can get a guy who's going to be able to replace Will Fries, and maybe that might be Matt Goncalves, don't know, but they need help on the offensive line to make sure, okay, we can show Anthony Richardson, okay, this is your chance, this is your year. If you don't make it this year, then we might go in a different direction, because time is wasting on this Colts team that hasn't done anything since technically 2014. So the last time they did anything like significant, you might have won. I think you might have won like one playoff game since then. Like, I'm just saying, as far as like a lot of turnovers potentially happening if they don't get this right in this draft or in this free agent class. So Wyatt Milum, I think, is a pretty good fit for them. Now moving on to, I kind of have like I couldn't decide which one I wanted to put ahead of the other. So like they're almost like I guess like a 6A, 6B. Like I said, I can't decide which one's 6, which one's 7. But this is going to be, I'm going to put the guard at 7 and put the center at 6. At 7, I'm going to have Tate Ratledge, and then at 6, I'm going to have Jared Wilson. So let's first talk about Tate Ratledge. Tate Ratledge, I think, has really good mentality. Like I said, he finishes on blocks. I think his technique is pretty relatively sound. Like I said, I think he had a really good career at Georgia. You ever see him be a leader, and I think that's going to carry over in the NFL. I just think he's going to be a solid option. I don't know how high of his ceiling is going to be, but as far as being a pretty good guard in the league, that's probably going to be drafted either late second or early third. I feel pretty confident he's going to be able to work out, and I'm like, you know what? I'll take a chance on him. Fill him in at like right guard, left guard, whichever one you need. And all right, we're cooking with oil. We're cooking with grease. We're doing well with Tate Ratledge. And some of these teams that desperately need them are going to be like the Seahawks, who desperately need help in their interior, because both guards were horrible. Olu came in later on after Connor Williams retired, had ups and downs. Like I said, I don't really know exactly how confident they're in an Olu from Michigan. I liked him coming out, so I'm hoping he kind of is able to develop. But they desperately need help in the interior, so I could definitely see them try and take like a guy who's going to be a bully kind of guy and take over that kind of role that you had with Damian Lewis that you lost last year. Now, past Seahawks, kind of the same thing I already talked about with the Colts. Like I said, if you want to put him in that Will Fries role and take over and be able to, like, you know what, just need a really solid guy who I know for a fact is probably going to be able to work out. Wyatt Milum has a little bit of he's a convert over, which is like I don't know just yet. Like, it's still kind of iffy. But if I'm going to be Tate Ratledge going to the Colts, I feel pretty solid. You know what? Plug him in there. That's going to work out. And then we don't have to really worry. Like, he might not be the top of the line, best of the best, but as long as he's going to work out, that's all we need. And then the last one I could potentially see Tate Ratledge going to is the Patriots. Like I said, Patriots need help on the offensive line in general. They desperately need help at the left tackle position. But the mentality, the kind of player that Tate Ratledge is, I think that Mike Vrabel is going to love that kind of guy. And obviously he's going to want that guy in his building. So that could be a potential fit for him, as well as, like I said, the Patriots need help on the offensive line. He is able to fill it and just be a really good option. And like I said before, number 6 is going to be Jared Wilson from Georgia. He shot up a lot of boards because of the year that he had and his athletic ability. Like I said, he is super athletic, and it shows on tape as well. But he had a really good season, as well as not only was him as a young age going against some of the best talent that we've seen come out with Jalen Carter, with Jordan Davis, so he has a lot of practice against them. But that all came together this year, and he comes out, and I think that he's probably going to be the first center taken, even though technically a lot of people see Zabel as being a center convert, which I'll talk about that a little bit later. But as far as a true center, like play the position before, Jared Wilson could be more likely to be the first center taken. And some people could see him be potentially taken a lot higher than like what is expected. I think he probably should be a second-round pick. I've heard some people say first-round pick. I think that's a little bit too high. But as far as like being a really good option, and I feel it still has so much more to learn, so much more to grow, I think Jared Wilson is probably going to work on the NFL, especially if he goes into a really good situation, like some of these fits. Like I said, obviously, talk about the Seahawks. Like I said, it's don't really know how they're going to deal with their interior offensive line, but it definitely needs to be addressed. If they feel like Olu's it can be the guy, they'll just focus on the guard positions. If they need like a full makeover, then I could see potentially Jerry Wilson be on the move, trying to be the kind of guy that the Seahawks want to get to make sure that, hey, we fill this offensive line. You got plenty of picks in the top 100, so you can potentially take them from them. So just saying that. Another one potentially, like I said, would be the Cowboys. Talked about before, Jake Majors, the same exact kind of thing. If they want to take a center in the second round, I'd be able to move Cooper Beebe over to guard. I think that'll be great for the Cowboys to be able to kind of fix some of the problems they already have in the offensive line to kind of solidify it for the next couple of years and just kind of do with Terrence Hill, and hopefully he gets back to where he was before when you signed that massive extension. All right, and then the last one is the Falcons. Now, obviously the Falcons, Drew Dahlman, he goes to the Bears. You got Ryan Neuzil, I think it's Neuzil. Don't feel really confident in that. And like I said, I think Jerry Wilson has a lot more potential. Obviously, I don't know if you want to put a second-year quarterback with a rookie center, but the potential could be there to be like something that kind of like you basically build your connection with your center and your center for the next however many years both of them are productive. Let's just say 8 years. That would be amazing for Atlanta. Even though I would hate it as a Panthers fan, but if you're Atlanta Falcons fan, I feel like things are kind of moving in the right direction. You like your coach. It's interesting to see like what they're going to do in the draft. Obviously, you want to take edge rusher in the first round, but to make sure you solidify the offense that is probably going to be what's going to carry you into the season, you need to make sure your center position is taken care of. So Jerry Wilson is potentially a player that you could be looking at, even though I feel pretty confident you're probably going to go a different direction. Something to kind of keep your eye out on. And then the last one in Tier 3, like I said, all these are Tier 3. The last one in Tier 3 is going to be Jonah Savaiinaea from Arizona, tackle convert going over to guard. In the same exact way that I could see, I talked about Ersery and his move, potentially if they want to move him to tackle to guard, but I feel better at guard, better at tackle. I think that Savaiinaea could stay at tackle, but I would much prefer him to move in at guard. I think like some of his issues is not as much not like Ersery, where both of them are big. Ersery has better movement skills. Savaiinaea doesn't. And also, Savaiinaea is not as strong as I expect him to be. So I'm kind of surprised about that. But he's still a big tackle that still moves well enough that I think in a zone scheme that's able to still let him use his feet as big as he is. He's able to work on some of it, on get a bigger mean streak, able to work on being able to convert his moves into into power moves. Like I said, I think that he could be able to be more of a developmental role that has a higher ceiling. That's the reason why I kind of move him a little bit higher, because I think that he has a very, very high ceiling because of what he could, like I said, potential. I try not to do that a lot because I think that's where you get trapped a lot of times. It's just like, oh, well, we can make him work. It's still kind of iffy, but from what I've seen from him, I like some of the stuff I'm able to see as far as especially his mirroring reps to be able to see. But he needs to work on his anchor, and I think it'd be better if he moves into guard because of the fact that he's going to get caught in a lot of circumstances where, because anchor is not good, especially against edge rushers that are really good power rushers, I don't feel really confident that he will be able to fit there at tackle. So move him into guard, and where he could potentially fit, well, the Bengals need a lot of help in the interior offensive line. Right now, I think they're starting Cody Ford and Volson. Like I said, I think you're good enough at tackles that you're fine. Like I said, Amaris Mims, hopefully he takes the next step in his second year. You are paying Orlando Brown. You need to find your future for your offensive line to make sure that, okay, Joe Burrow is protected. Jonah Savaiinaea, I think, could potentially be able to be that guy to be able to come in, hopefully be able to have a young right side. If both of them work well together, then you have that for the next at least 5 years, and that works out well for Joe Burrow to be able to protect him. Because like I said, I like Jonah Savaiinaea is like his mirroring is really really good. He just works on his anchor. Like I said, with the Cowboys, they need to fix their interior offensive line. Don't know how they're going to do it, but they keep Cooper Beebe there, move Jonah Savaiinaea to right guard. I think they'll be perfectly fine for them too. Like I said, later on in the draft, focusing on always the flashy pick in the first round. But if they want to make sure they actually solidify their offensive line for whoever they have running the ball, whether that be Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, or if they take a running back in the draft, you need to fix the offensive line before anything else, because that needs to be. I lost kind of train of thought there, but be what you were before. Be a running team that works off of well for Dak Prescott, and by doing so, have a good offensive line. The last one I can potentially see is the Raiders. Like I said, I feel like the Raiders are going to go either running back or cornerback in the first round. Those are the two biggest needs. Obviously, a lot of people saying Genty. I'm looking at potentially a Will Johnson, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. But you need to fix the offensive line. If you move Savaiinaea over to right guard, like I said, I think that improves your offensive line enough, though you can be like, okay, I've taken, say you take Genty at 6, you take Savaiinaea in the second or third. I think that you feel pretty confident, okay, let's try to make sure we can kind of establish the run game, and then in next year's draft, maybe able to fix even more of his offensive line if DJ Glaze doesn't work out, or if there's some other problems that start showing up. But you need to fix the offensive line, because in order to be able to have a good offense, especially against these AFC West teams you're going against, like the Broncos, the Chargers, and the Chiefs, you have to have a good offensive line to be able to establish a run game. So that's kind of talking about the Raiders. But like I said, I could see him potentially being fit for Savaiinaea being a good fit for the Raiders. Now moving on to the top 5 interior offensive linemen. Let's talk about tier 2. At number 5, I feel the same kind of way where I have to feel like Tate Ratledge, but just a slight little bit above. I feel like Donovan Jackson is going to be a really good offensive lineman. I don't know his ceiling. Like I said, I think his ceiling is still relatively high. But obviously he came in last year where he took over when Josh Simmons got hurt, played left tackle, did an admirable job, but he's better suited at guard. So him being at left guard, I think would be perfectly for him, like I said, instead of moving over to right guard. But I think if you're the Texans, let's just say that in the first round you take a right guard, and then you come back in the second round, you take Donovan Jackson. So you got your guards. You're hoping and praying that your tackles work out. I think that would work out for the Texans as far as okay, we are actually protecting C.J. Stroud, or we're throwing bodies to make sure that we can be able to protect C.J. Stroud, because I think your defense is fine, but you got to be able to fix the offensive line. He is one of those players that I think could automatically come in and heavily improve that offensive line, as well as, like I said before, the Raiders. So if the Raiders are just you know what, this is a rebuilding process, we'll kind of make do with what we have, and in the second round they would make sure they can fix their offensive line, take Donovan Jackson. Like I said, I know you got Powers Johnson in the second round last year, but like I said, you need to invest in the offensive line because it's a desperate need for you, especially going against a lot of these against the AFC West. So Donovan Jackson thinks works out really well for the Raiders if he's in that position. And the last one is going to be the Seahawks. Like I said, the Seahawks they're all these teams that I'm mentioning desperately need help on the interior offensive line. Seahawks, I think you're good on your bookend tackles as long as they're healthy. But man, like I said, you desperately need help with Donovan Jackson being there. That would be able to be your Damian Lewis fill-in. Like I said, you'd have Charles Cross, Donovan Jackson, potentially another player that I'll talk about, and then you have Abraham Lucas at your right tackle position, and just hope and pray that maybe you might be able to find a right guard, say either in late free agency that you might pick up, or heck, you might just be like, you know what, let's just see, like, whoever possibly wants this job, you take it and you try to make it, and you try to make it work, try to keep your position, or else we'll try to replace you. Because like I said, you desperately need help in that interior, because that interior was awful. Now, moving on to number 4, and that's going to be Tyler Booker. Now, Tyler Booker is a really, really good power guard. And honestly, I can understand why some people want him to be in the first round. I think there's potentially go in the first round, later half in the first round. However, even though he's a really good power guard, the man cannot really adjust in space. And that's a very big concern, especially going into the NFL. I think if he's at right guard, he's not having to move as much, especially as a left guard, I think that's fine. Like I said, more often than not, he's down blocking, he's going up to the second level, he's not pulling or anything like that, not putting himself in a bad situation. So if he is a right guard and Donovan Jackson is the left guard, then I think that's perfectly fine for whoever team ends up taking both of them. That could potentially be an option. But for Tyler Booker, I think a perfect fit for him would be the Texans, because the Texans would be an interesting spot of, like, all these players not falling to them. If they're able to take Tyler Booker at pick 25, I think you're fine with that, because not only is he has really good mentality as far as like high motor, but really, really strong dude. And I think it's going to be a really solid offensive lineman, and that's what you need. You just need to make sure you have solid pieces at this point, because right now it is looking pretty bad. Another one, like I said, a lot of these are kind of be talking about, so I'm kind of rushing through it. The Giants, you need a lot of help in the offensive line. Talked about with tackles, but at the same exact time, you still need help in the interior, because even though there's more of like an unproven talent, you got Greg Van Roten coming in to be that right guard. I think he's solid enough, so you don't really have to focus on that. But like, if you don't feel super duper confident in what you've already invested, like I said, if you're Joe Shane and Brian Dable, this is like your last year. So you're just hoping, like, you know what, let's just throw something at the wall. Hopefully it sticks, because otherwise we're out of our job anyways. So try to fix that offensive line, because you desperately need to. Especially having Russell Wilson as your quarterback. And then the last one is going to be the I'm iffy on this one, because it doesn't really fit with the way, like, as far as like the offensive scheme. But if you want to have an enforcer, and you're kind of hoping that, we can kind of fix some of the problems around that, it's going to be the Dolphins. Like I said, you had Robert Hunt, who was a huge enforcer for you at right guard for you. You lost him, and it showed last year. So is Tyler Booker as, athletically gifted as far as especially his lateral movement than Robert Hunt? No. But if you want someone with a mean streak, if you want someone who's going to be really, really solid, and someone who's going to bring back physicality to your offensive line, that would be Tyler Booker that you can get in the second round. Potentially, if he starts falling that far, because of like some of his shortcomings. So this is, like I said, been a very long episode, but now we're getting to the top 2 interior offensive line. Both of these are tackle converts. Like I said, I think the tackle class as is would be really amazing if not for a lot of them moving into interior offensive line because of some of their shortcomings. And starting off with number 2 is going to be Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. Gray Zabel's been one that's been rising up, especially after his amazing Senior Bowl, where he transitioned from tackle to be playing center at Senior Bowl, and it worked flawlessly. A lot of people are looking at him at being an almost lock for the Seahawks. I could potentially see that as well. I'll talk about that a little bit, but I really like his movement skills. I do agree he needs to move inside, but again, at the Senior Bowl, it showed, he has really great movement skills. You're able to see him as a tackle, and his potential at center is sky high because we still haven't seen that much from him yet. So I think it's still like, a lot of projection, but I think there's enough basis because you were able to see it at the Senior Bowl against some of the best talent that's coming into this draft class that I feel pretty confident. You're like, you know what? I'll go off of based off of talent alone and take him in like that mid first round going into later first round. So I'll talk about that now with Gray Zabel as far as like some of his fits. Obviously talk about the Seahawks. That's the main one that's kind of been talking about. Is just like, you know what, he is potential to be the guy that can really help this offensive line, this interior offensive line, just take the next step. And his position versatility, something the Seahawks desperately need, because when their tackles went down, it was really, really bad. So if you're able to get somebody that's able to be, play multiple positions, then you're not as concerned. It was like, okay, this is not going to work out, or like, crap, we have nobody that can play tackle. Well, now you do. You're just taking somebody who is who could potentially be a really good center, and moving him to tackle where like he has some limitations but still could play that position. So I think his position flexibility is also going to make him go up the draft boards as well. And if he goes to Seattle, I think it could work out for them as well in that Clint Kubiak system. Another one, too, that could potentially see him going is, if I talked about the Cowboys before, that would be kind of crazy if they somehow take him at pick 12. I don't think that they would, but that is, like I said, potential if they're, going to want to go that, 2011 to 2015 is when they took Travis Frederick. I think if they want to go in that range of just like, taking off his line in the first round and having it work out, hey, you know what? Sure, go with it, Cowboys, because I think you desperately need to. That's one of your big needs that a lot of people aren't talking about, because everyone's talking about like, oh, they're going to go flashy, they're going to go wide receiver, they're going to go running back. Could go there, but I think there's still a high possibility they could possibly go with offensive line. And then lastly, if Zabel falls past the Seahawks, I could potentially see the Lions trying to go after Gray Zabel, because Gray Zabel could come in and immediately start at right guard, not be a center. He's still got Frank Ragnow, but having him at right guard, having Frank Ragnow, who has some injury histories, has come back from it, has done a really good job. But if he goes down, who do you have to replace him? You can move Greg Zabel over, and he could be able to work out at center. So that would be, in my opinion, one of the best spots for him potentially, because not only do you have, if you're a right guard, you have Penei Sewell to your right, which is, outstanding for you. But you're able to, not have the responsibilities of being a center, still being able to learn the position while also being a contributing member to the offensive line. I would love that for him. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to go a little bit earlier. So, for my top interior offensive lineman, it is going to be another tackle convert, and that's going to be Kelvin Banks Jr. Now, I am like teetering on if I feel like he could be a tackle or a guard, but I really, really like his potential at a guard, that I'm going to move him inside, even though it's not like, where a lot of people talk about like, well, Campbell, where it's just like, oh, he's got alligator arms. Like no, I really feel like his style of play could really work at guard. So that's where you want to put him in top interior offensive guard. If it works at tackle, that's perfectly fine for me, because I think like I said, I think he's a really good player that is going to make some team really, really happy. So let's talk about, and also, first of all, watching Kelvin Banks Jr. for Quinn Ewers, because I was trying to see like how I felt about Quinn Ewers. There were so many times you're watching Kelvin Banks Jr. and you're just like, I feel bad for the guy, because Quinn Ewers, sometimes his pocket presence was absolutely abhorrent and just made Kelvin Banks look terrible, because it would be a sack on Kelvin Banks, and it wouldn't be his fault. Like, there's literally one time that instead of stepping up in the pocket, Quinn Ewers is still back there, so Kelvin Banks takes Michael Williams and basically just rushes him out. I think it's Michael Williams, either him or Jalen Walker, but just like washes him out, and then Quinn Ewers gets tripped up because he's, for some reason, still staying at the back of the pocket instead of stepping up. And the Kelvin Banks is just like, what are you doing? And then another time, like, he just, like, instead of where there's barely any holes, he decides he wants to go in between the left guard and Kelvin Banks Jr., so of course he's going to get sacked. Quinn Ewers, you can't just run away from your problems. You have to actually, step in the pocket. You have to make decisions that you might get blasted, but you still have to step up, or otherwise you make an offensive lineman look way better than it actually is. So Kelvin Banks, even though he might get credited, I think, possibly for those 2 sacks, that's not really his fault. He did what he was supposed to do. So I wanted to preface that too, because I think that some people have said that it was a bad game for him. And initially I thought it was, but then when you really watch, you're like, that's not on him. It is definitely not on him. So I just want to preface that. But Kelvin Banks, I really like his potential. I think that, like I said, has good movement skills. He went against some of the best, and he still competed well. But I just feel like a lot of the NFL is also going to see how I see him, and that is be even better as a guard. So move him inside and has all the potential in the world. So some of this fits. I'm going to mention the Cowboys again. Like I said, I don't think that they would take him at 12. But if they want to put somebody at right guard, or potentially, I don't know, do you want to move Tyler Guyton back over to right, even though technically you have Terrence Steele? I don't know, but it would definitely be a Cowboys pick just to kind of screw up the whole entire draft. And that's what I'm saying. In my mind, I just feel like there's some way somehow that they're going to take Kelvin Banks and just completely like, oh crap, now some of these players are going to start falling, or now the run of tackles and guards are going to start happening. But just wanted to preface that. Also, I could potentially see the Dolphins. Like I said, if the Cowboys don't take him at 12, at pick 13, I desperately want them to take Kelvin Banks at 13 because, one, I wanted them to take Graham Barton last year. They didn't. Chop Robinson still had a pretty decent year, but still, you need to fix the offensive line. You already had two good edge rushers. Yes, they got injured, but still, you need to fix your offensive line. So if you're pick 13, now Kelvin Banks is there, do you want Liam Eichenberg to be starting at left guard? Probably not. So let's have Patrick Paul and then Kelvin Banks at left guard. That would work so well for you. That would work out so well for you. Now, like I said, I'm not the GM. I'm not Chris Greer. A lot of the Dolphins fans are like, you make sure you don't screw this up this time. I really don't know what the Dolphins are going to do. They could go in many different directions, but if you take Kelvin Banks, I feel like that's the best possible option for you, or Malachi Stark, which is another one that could potentially fall to them as well. But the last one, and a lot of Texans fans desperately want him to fall, Kelvin Banks to the Texans could work out so much better for them, and I think in that case, you could keep him at tackle. Like I said, I feel really confident that he would be even better at guard. But he's one of the players that I'm like, I don't know where I would rather you be. So have him just place in some kind of position for him at Texans. Texans seem to like getting guys from Texas as well, so there's that too. But I would love for him to be on the Texans. However, I don't think he's going to last that far. So unless the Texans trade up to get him, I see Kelvin Banks should be going off relatively early. I don't think he's going to have a free fall. Like I said, he has too much potential for somebody to just be like, you know what, we don't want that guy. So this is a very, very long draft video. All the offensive line and, like I said, got all 17 that I have in my top 100. There's a lot of potential in this draft class. I'm really excited to see where this goes. And thank you so much for watching. Like I said, I'll have the defensive coming up in the next 2 days. And as always, thank you so much for coming, and I'll see you the next one. Bye.